Senator, I've got a column in the works on my particular view of why the Trump convictions will be reversed. Everybody's got a favorite grounds for appeal. What do you think is the biggest hole in the travesty of last week?
Well, Hugh, the whole thing was a sham political witch hunt, reminiscent of Stalinist show trials in Soviet Russia. It's hard to know where to begin on how many reversible errors were committed during the trial. I thought Andrew McCarthy on your show yesterday did a very good job of running through a lawyer's analysis of it. But from just a common sense layman standpoint, I think most fair-minded Americans can look at what happened in New York and say that this was grossly unfair and unjust for Donald Trump. You had a prosecutor who campaigned getting Donald Trump, and you had a judge who was a literal Biden donor, specifically to what he called stopping Trump in 2020, that judge didn't recuse. So it's not surprising that the judge put his finger on the scales at every single term, committing what Andrew McCarthy laid out was probably at least 6 or 7 reversible errors. And the reason they did that, Hugh, is that they know that Joe Biden can't succeed on his own. He can't defend his weak, failed record of runaway inflation and a chaotic border and war breaking out all around the world. The only way he thinks he can beat Donald Trump is to weaponize their legal system against him. It's a very sad day for American justice and America standing around the world. Frankly, what happened in New York is the kind of thing that America would sanction a foreign country for, interfering in an election and trying to imprison one's political opponent, something you would expect to see in the countries of Pakistan or Georgia, Brazil, not here in the United States.
Senator Cotton, it's very interesting you mentioned the Andy McCarthy podcast, because he did. I counted the number of grounds of appeals that Andy mentioned. There were 10 in that podcast. But then he and I exchanged messages because he didn't bring up my favorite, which you did, which is the fact that Judge Marcon contributed to Joe Biden and contributed to 2 anti-Trump outlets through Act Blue. And I spent the last 3 days researching this. I didn't realize, because I just didn't, I thought it was bad judgment, but not illegal. It's black letter law in New York that you may not do that. And he was sanctioned by the Commission on Judges, judicial oversight body, a private caution letter, not a public sanction, but which was not revealed. And that all happened in July of last year, and he still presided. I'm astonished by that. I'm also astonished that the media, there are literally 2 articles on Marcon and his conflict, one in the New York Times, one in Reuters. I can't find out why he got assigned to this case. I can't find out anything about him or about this disciplinary measure. Do you think that would be the case if it was Judge Cannon in Florida who had been sanctioned?
Yeah. Suffice to say, every commentator on MSNBC would be manning the ramparts if it were Judge Cannon in the Florida case against President Trump, or for that matter, one of the judges in the cases against Hunter Biden. But again, as you say, Hugh, this is not a close call. This is not like a judgment call that judges have to make during trial all the time and weighing the probative value of evidence versus the prejudicial harm caused by it, some of which I think is obvious grounds for reversible error as well. It is the black letter law in New York, as in most states, that a sitting judge cannot make political contributions. Judge Marcon would have been guilty of that wrongdoing and breaking that law, even if he had never sat on Donald Trump's case. No sitting judge should be contributing money to partisan political candidates. It's akin, Hugh, to some of the rules that we had in the Army. You were entitled as a soldier to contribute money if you wanted to, or certainly to go vote, but you couldn't be driving around post, with a George Bush or a John Kerry sticker out. Or if you lived in on-post housing, you certainly couldn't be posting political signs out in your front yard. Every judge knows that they should not be contributing money to partisan political candidates. Yet Judge Marcon did, and I know that the libs only rejoinder as well. It was only $35. But as we've discussed before, the small amounts in some ways makes it worse because he knew that he wasn't actually helping Joe Biden. He wanted to signal, though, to Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer and the New York machine, I'm on your team. I'm reliable. You can count on me.
That is the only explanation And I talk about that. You can read it in the Post. You know, when I signed up for the Post, I agreed not to make contributions to political campaigns. I've usually been a fairly regular donor to Senate campaigns because I think the Senate matters the most. I may have contributed to you, I don't even remember. But I can't do it anymore because I got a contract that says you can't do it. That contract, by the way, is covered by an NDA, which is perfectly legit, as is my NBC contract, NDA, as is my Salem contract, NDA. NDAs are everywhere. People think they're unusual. I got 3 of them. Senator Cotton, you bring up Hunter Biden. My old boss from White House days has retired to run a golf range and a Cuban hot dog stand in Miami. But he and I have been following the Hunter Biden thing. I just proposed him. I think they're going to get jury nullification in Delaware because Delaware is a very small state. And everyone's going to know it's Hunter Biden. He's probably the most infamous relative of president ever. Billy Carter used to be it, or Bob Clinton, or whatever Bill Clinton's brother was, or before that. Do you think jury nullification is going to work there? Because it's an open and shut case. I mean, he falls, it's 18 U.S.C. 1001 twice.
Well, Hugh, I don't know. I wouldn't prejudge what the jury will do there. As we saw in the witch hunt against Donald Trump in New York, the judge can greatly, decisively even, influence the jury's decision by excluding evidence, omitting evidence, getting rigged jury instructions. So I wouldn't hazard guess in advance of what the jury will do. I will say I read some of the coverage from jury selection yesterday, and it did not bode well for a jury that's going to be sympathetic to Hunter Biden. Almost every person who was released from jury duty during jury selection yesterday seems to have known Hunter Biden and have a very low opinion of him, which, frankly, given his many crimes and misdeeds, is understandable. I mean, he's apparently, to this day, he's still a deadbeat ex-husband refusing to pay the alimony that he agreed to. As you know, as I said on your program for many years where he admitted to it, he was refusing to acknowledge paternity for one of my constituents, pay child support, and even after he agreed to continue to refuse to pay it. You know, part of the underlying facts of this case is that he was having an affair on his wife with his brother's widow. So I can't imagine they're going to find many people who are too sympathetic to Hunter Biden's case and behavior, but you may be right that they find people who are sympathetic to the Democratic Party and Joe Biden. But again, in contrast to Donald Trump's case, where he didn't even know the charges against him, they weren't revealed in the indictment, they weren't specified in the jury instruction, it was like the Star Chamber. Hunter Biden, by contrast, has so many specific charges against him, citing a specific statute of the Federal Criminal Code, that he probably can't even keep them straight between 2 different jurisdictions.
Now, Senator Cotton, I have a column out at Fox News this morning that was prompted by Paul Simon's song that predates your birth, 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover. It's 50 Reasons for the Outrage. The outrage over the Trump verdict is like the Mississippi. And the Mississippi's fed by the Ohio, the Missouri, and 100 other rivers. Maybe the Arkansas River goes in the Mississippi, too. I don't know. But lots of reasons for the outrage, 50 reasons for the outrage. Are you still, nevertheless, surprised at $300 million in contributions to the Trump campaign, and do you expect the donation tsunami to continue?
Well, I'm mostly surprised by your lack of geographic knowledge that the Arkansas River does, in fact, empty into the Mississippi River.
You should be happy that I knew there was an Arkansas River.
I can't say that I'm terribly surprised, Hugh. I mean, it is such a manifest injustice. I thought the callers you had on your show yesterday were telling people who have never contributed money in their lives to a political candidate. In many cases, as I said, didn't have a lot of means to contribute.
We just lost the senator. He's probably. Oh, you're back. Go ahead, Senator.
Yeah. So in a way, it's surprising. You had so many people on your show yesterday who said they'd never given money before to a candidate, didn't really have the means to contribute, but they stretched because they wanted to show support for President Trump in the face of this witch hunt. And right now, that's the single best way that they can do it. And I'd encourage them to continue doing it at President Trump's website or WinRed. But also would remind all of your listeners, especially those who are in critical swing states like Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania, that soon enough, the best way for you to support President Trump will be to get out and vote. And not just get out and vote, but make sure that your family and friends are doing so as well. They understand the stakes of this election. that we can have a return to the peace and prosperity that we had with President Trump and a Republican Senate for 4 years, or we can continue this socialist collapse of America that we're increasingly seeing under Joe Biden.
Last question, Senator. Do you think that they're going to translate that initial jump into politics into volunteering for a campaign? I know you've run statewide campaigns in Arkansas and that you've helped out nationally, and you know what volunteers matter, but it's a big step to go to a contribution. It's another big step to become an activist. Do you think that's going to happen here?
I think it will to some degree, Hugh. Obviously, some people don't have the time to do anything other than pitch in 10 or 20 or $50 on the internet, and that's fine. And I'm sure President Trump is very grateful for that. But I was struck, too, by the number of first-time donors that President Trump had. That means that not just they gave $10 at the end of May, but they could give $10 for each month between now and November. We used to say that, that would be like skipping an entire family meal at McDonald's. Now, thanks to Biden's inflation, it's like skipping a Egg McMuffin and a cup of coffee for yourself. But nonetheless, they can contribute every month for now and then. But some number of those two, having contributed, having signed up for President Trump's donor list, I'm confident will also, when asked, as the campaign no doubt will, become activists, even if it's nothing more than being willing to sit down and make 10 phone calls that the campaign sends them later this fall to encourage people to get out and vote, to vote early or to vote by mail as the state law allows them. So I think you saw not just an outpouring of financial support for the president's campaign, but political support as well, because so many Americans are outraged at this political witch hunt, and they remember the peace and prosperity we had during Donald Trump's first term.